BC brought this up, and I love this topic because I really feel like it's important to have this conversation. So we just had Jim Miller, who had a great win over the weekend, right? First time he gets a knockout in his whole UFC run. The guy's 38 years old. He's got a 33-16 record, 1 no contest. There apparently was debate. I didn't see this, but BC saw it, that people were debating whether or not he belongs in the UFC Hall of Fame. Now, BC, before I straight up ask you, do you believe he should go in there? Let me just read some facts for the audience to see what they think about it. I mentioned his age and I mentioned his record. He's got most fights in UFC history at 38, which is just ridiculous. Most sub-attempts in UFC history, 45. It's tied for the second most wins in UFC history at 22. Tied for the third most finishes in UFC history at 14. Tied for the third most sub-wins in UFC history at 10. Sixth most total fight night bonuses at 13. He's got wins over Ludwig, Tibau, Oliveira, who's the current champion, Jolazon twice, and Thiago Alves. He has losses to Frankie Edgar, Maynard, Benson Henderson, Nate Diaz, Donald Cerrone, Beneil Dariush, Michael Chiesa, Dustin Poirier, Anthony Pettis, Dan Hooker, and also Charles Oliveira as well. BC, does Jim Miller belong in the UFC or any Hall of Fame?
Again, as anytime we bring up Hall of Fame, and I think they're worth debating the merits, the criteria, all that, each Hall of Fame is so different. I've told you so many times how upset I am that, the NBA doesn't have their own Hall of Fame. They have the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame, which, inducts you for college or high school purposes or women's basketball coaching victories just as much as it does for NBA success. It's just not the perfect sort of, I don't know, maybe I just grew up believing it. The Baseball Hall of Fame, Luke, always had that heart. Even before, the Veterans Committee would vote in guys that maybe didn't deserve it, but it's been 40 years. They had that hard line, right? And Don Mattingly was on the other side of that hard line because he was great for a window, but then he kind of lingered on, and he was, a lesser version of himself, not Hall of Fame worthy. And we always said, okay, that guy was great. In his prime, he was a Hall of Famer, but, he didn't have a full prime. So that's on him. He's got to be on the outside looking in. And Luke, I like in any Hall of Fame when there is a Mendoza line, when there's that thing that says, sorry, you can't pass. In this discussion, the UFC Hall of Fame doesn't have that. It's like the WWE Hall of Fame. It just seems to just be there because, we should do a Hall of Fame. And then the people that get in, look, again, my rant against, Diego Sanchez didn't get in the UFC Hall of Fame. His fight against Clay Guida got in. But now everybody's saying that he's a Hall of Famer. So it's confusing to begin with, Luke. We know UFC holds grudges against certain people. They'll never get in that they deserve. We know that, the Bonners and the Griffins get in right away because of the love that the organization has for them. Will Jim Miller make the UFC Hall of Fame? He probably will, Luke, given the fact, and by the way, I don't hold him back from this and say he shouldn't because the guy's been such a grinder. We talked about it the other day. And just to linger at this point and still be viable, it's a tip of the cap to him. The UFC loves that. I hope he gets the recognition he deserves. But if we had a real UFC Hall of Fame to the same standards of the pro football or Major League Baseball or even boxing, boxing's Hall of Fame can be a shit show sometimes, but for the most part, they get it right. No, Luke, he's not a Hall of Famer. And I think in baseball, sometimes when we have these legacy statistics that people aim for, they're like, okay, I was a 2-time All-Star and a decent player, but bro, if I don't get hurt and I can still keep hitting until I'm 41, I might be able to get 3,000 hits, and that gets me in the Hall of Fame. Or, Don Sutton getting 300 wins when, was he ever really a true dominant guy in the 70s and 80s, best pitcher in the game? Not really. Those guys to me are compilers, Luke. I would put Jim Miller under the compiler ranking and say, if we had a legitimate fight Hall of Fame, he wouldn't get in. But it doesn't mean I wouldn't love him, laud him, and be clapping for him when he does get in the UFC Hall of Fame. Do you believe that it's worth me having this stance? Because I've said the same thing in boxing about Sergio Martinez, who had such a great, short, peak run at top, but then couldn't get anybody to fight him. And it's like, do we take those 4 or 5 fights when he was number 2 pound for pound and be like, I saw a Hall of Famer with my eyes? Or do we just basically say, I'm sorry, you fought 1.5 elite, super elite guys because nobody would box you. You can't get in because of that.
I'm with you. I don't think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. But it's a question of, to me, what kind of Hall of Fame you want. Right? So this is one of those debates that tends to reveal which people watch other sports and which ones don't, which is a common thing in MMA. MMA is an interesting sport where you get people who are sports fans, But you get a lot of people who are not sports fans, and this is the only sport that they like. And so because they have strong feelings towards Jim Miller, in part because he has some real achievements, some very real achievements. I mean, Jim Miller's career is extraordinary in certain ways, no doubt about it. But if you are just looking at what other Hall of Fames require to get in, it's just a significantly higher bar than what UFC provides. I mean, understand what we're talking about here. The Pro Football Hall of Fame is not run by the NFL. It's a separate entity that you have to get into altogether. The UFC runs their own Hall of Fame. So if you want a UFC-run Hall of Fame where the bar is lowered to get in, yes, I think in that case, Jim Miller does deserve to get in. If you want the UFC Hall of Fame to more resemble our contemporaries in other sporting endeavors, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, among others, then you have to raise the bar. To me, BC, if you're not putting him in there for a fight, you're putting him in there for his achievements. He's never had a title shot. Now, I understand some of that is arbitrary, but if he had beaten Nate Diaz at UFC on Fox 3, he might have gotten one. It was certainly possible there. But you can't argue he ever really deserved one. He never beat someone enough times at enough high of a level to ever really merit one. You can't show me the spot on his record where it was denied to him. That doesn't mean he didn't achieve. That doesn't mean he's not great. That doesn't mean what he's doing now is ignorable. What he's doing now is phenomenal. But the guys who are supposed to go into the Hall of Fame, if what we are looking at is what other pro sports do, this is not even a debate. It's not even a question he doesn't belong. It's just that the UFC has a Hall of Fame where they have guys who have done extraordinary things like St. Pierre, people who have been in extraordinary fights, right, that extra fight wing, pioneers and whatnot. And then it's got a little bit of a place for people who, to your point, the compilers, the ones who just have real great longevity, never super high achievers, but achieved a different kind of things by virtue of the amount of time they spent in the sport and how long they were able to have a consistent level of success. I think that's worth celebrating. I think that's worth acknowledging. Tip of the cap times 1,000. I don't think that qualifies you for a stringent level of screens to clear in order to be into a Hall of Fame. Personally.
We have a poll on Twitter right now. You can go to @MorningCombat on Twitter and give your say as to whether Jim Miller belongs.
I think it's in the YouTube chat.
I'm sorry, the YouTube chat. Excuse me. Well, we can push the racism and misogyny aside, thankfully, and police that and get a nice poll in there. Luke, if the fight game had the type of stringency I'm looking for, and let me just update you on boxing. Like when Mike Tyson got in, by the way, in 2011, there were some people who were like, man, he had a half of a great career. I think overall with what Tyson accomplished, youngest heavyweight champion ever, I was able to say yes. When Arturo Gatti got in, you had a lot of people going, okay, now we're just doing Hall of Fame, not Hall of Greatness, right? This guy's famous for fights. That was a little bit. Luke, when Riddick Bowe got in, was there a season where he was the world heavyweight champion and among the best and looked to be among the best in history? Yeah, but bro, that season was short. That guy's career fell apart by age 27. The great wins he had were very pocketed together. I didn't think Riddick Bowe should have got in. If we had this line in the sand, Jim Miller doesn't get in. And I want to ask you a couple hard questions, Luke. Does Cowboy Cerrone belong in the Hall if BC took over the UFC Hall of Fame?
No. He had a title shot. I think at least one of them, if not two, against Dos Anjos, the first one anyway, and he got sent packing pretty quickly.
Yeah, this is Craig Biggio, right? I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to disrespect anybody. A guy who Cowboy's an all-star, fan favorite, not a super elite Hall of Famer. All right, let me ask you a harder question. If Michael Bisping never beat Luke Rockhold, Hall of Famer in my criteria?
No.
Oh.
Mm-mm.
Well,
again, if what we're examining is what we do traditionally in other sports Hall of Fames that are run independently of the sports organization, typically, what kind of threshold for entry do you get? It's just dude. It wouldn't. Here's the funny part about it: if we had one like that, people have tried MMA Hall of Fames and they've never worked. But if we actually had that, if we really tried that, this wouldn't even be a question. There'd be no chance they'd get in. The only reason they'd get in is because I understand it. The fans love them and they respect that hustle over time. You have to. You cannot deny them that. But that respect that we confer upon them for their longevity and for many of the great moments that they have given to us and their lives as martial artists and prize fighters, we recognize those achievements, but by themselves, those are not the key to the door into the entry of the Hall of Fame. It's not nearly enough. St. Pierre gets to go into the Hall of Fame. Anderson Silva gets to go into the Hall of Fame. And guys close in that proximity. This is, to me, not there, and I don't think you can argue otherwise.
All right, let me close and we can move on, but let me close by asking you this. Give me 2 or 3 fighters that under my hardcore stringent category way of looking at it would actually make my Hall of Fame in the UFC right now that are active and in the midst of their prime. Who do you think has already done enough to stamp that?
Jon Jones. I mean, he's already in, but I mean, independent of the fight, right?
Yeah, he's the greatest of all time. He's in, Luke. He's in on day one. Okay, yeah.
Well, he's active, I guess.
I mean, look, Max Holloway. He's already in, Luke. He's already made my Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he's probably in. Mm-hmm. That's right. That's the level of achievement I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
It's a different level. It's not a guy who was always sort of like a very good lightweight and, top 10-ish at times. We're talking about guys who were champions or, champions for long periods of time or challenged in different weight class. I mean, you got to do special shit to get into the Hall of Fame. And I think everyone, this is, to me, it's funny. It's like the fans always get after the media and everyone else. And the media is split on this too. For like, oh, everyone wants to be entitlement society and everyone gets a trophy. This is putting people in that don't deserve to be in is the very definition of giving everyone a trophy just because you like them and you want them to feel good. Dude, it's hard because here's the problem, BC. We've got in or out. It's binary. Either you're in the Hall of Fame or you're not in the Hall of Fame. I know we got to get moving, but the point I'm trying to make is we don't have some kind of celebration for the Jim Millers, for the Cerrones, for the Demi and Mayas. I would put him somewhere in that category as well, BC. Guys who did
How about health benefits? Can we fix Stephan Bonner, please? I mean, seriously.
Okay, what I'm trying to say is some kind of accolade that recognizes that achievement, but clearly differentiates it from the very elite tier that the sport can offer.